Olivia, I've been going through the latest economic data, and honestly, it's chilling. America's total debt has blasted past $35 trillion, dollars, and the cracks are spreading faster than anyone wants to admit.
I saw that too, and it's not just federal debt. Cities are hollowing out, state budgets are bleeding, and families are drowning under bills they can't pay. It feels fragile, like one big shock could snap everything.
Exactly. People keep calling it a possible recession, but what's coming is bigger. When entire industries are evaporating and infrastructure is literally crumbling under our feet, we're not talking about a slowdown. We're talking about a nationwide unraveling.
And here's what scares me the most. Not all states will fall at the same time. Some are already standing on the edge. The latest data shows 10 states are positioned to collapse first the moment the national economy cracks.
Then let's expose them one by one. Because if Americans don't see what's coming, they won't be ready. Nevada, the land of neon lights, jackpots, and sleepless nights. But Olivia, beneath that sparkling surface is one of the most fragile economies in America. The numbers are brutal. Nearly 42% of Nevada's entire workforce depends on tourism, entertainment, and leisure.
Which means the moment a recession hits, people stop traveling, stop gambling, stop booking hotels, and suddenly Las Vegas isn't a money machine anymore. It's a ghost town. During downturns, visitor numbers can plunge from over 40 million to nearly 35 million, wiping out $3 billion in revenue almost overnight.
And that's just the surface. Nevada has another Achilles heel, gold mining. Sounds stable, right? Except it isn't. The state produces about 6 million ounces of gold a year, over $12 billion worth, but gold prices swing like a pendulum.
When global markets shake, that number can collapse, and entire rural counties lose their only source of income.
And then there's the monster no one can escape, water. Southern Nevada gets 90% of its water from Lake Mead, and that lake is at historic lows.
You can't run Las Vegas with its hotels, fountains, golf courses, and 3.2 million residents without water. A shrinking river means shortages, rationing, and eventually people leaving the state.
Right, and the population has ballooned past 3.2 million, fueled largely by Californians fleeing high costs. But here's the catch. When the economy tanks and the jobs vanish, that migration reverses. Homes empty out, property taxes collapse, neighborhoods hollow.
Crime is already creeping up. Las Vegas is dealing with violent crime rates above the national average, and that's during good times. Imagine what happens when billions vanish from the Strip.
Nevada's economy has always been a gamble, but now the house is running out of chips. And when the national economy crashes,
Nevada won't just struggle, it will crumble first.
Louisiana, you look at it on a map and see jazz, seafood, Mardi Gras, culture. But behind all that color, the foundation is cracking. And when the U.S. economy collapses, this state won't just wobble. It could be one of the first to go under.
Right. People don't realize how dangerously dependent Louisiana is on a single lifeline: oil, gas, and petrochemicals. More than 260,000 jobs are tied directly or indirectly to that one sector, and it brings in over $10 billion in petroleum exports each year.
But that's exactly the problem. If global demand drops or a tariff war hits, like we've already seen in recent years, oil prices can fall by half in months. And when that happens,
Thousands of workers in places like Lake Charles and Baton Rouge could lose their jobs almost overnight.
and the devastation doesn't stop at jobs. Louisiana relies on oil and gas revenue for 40% of its entire state budget. So when prices crash, the budget doesn't just suffer, it collapses. In 2020 alone, they lost nearly $1 billion in tax revenue. Imagine that happening again, but with today's higher inflation and deeper state debt.
And then we have the climate disasters. Hurricanes are hitting harder, faster, and more frequently. Just Hurricanes Laura and Ida cost more than $100 billion in damage. And insurance companies, they're fleeing. Homeowners are now staring at annual premiums of $5,000 to $8,000 if they can even get coverage at all.
New Orleans still hasn't fully recovered from Katrina, and the levee system, the one thing standing between survival and catastrophe, remains shaky almost 20 years later. One major storm hitting at the wrong angle, and it's game over.
And economically, the state is already suffocating. Nearly 20% of residents live in poverty, one of the highest rates in the nation. The median household income sits around $55,000, far below the U.S. average, while basic costs, food, power, housing, keep climbing.
Even tourism, their other lifeline, is fragile. New Orleans alone accounts for millions of visitors, and if tourism drops just 25%, thousands of musicians, chefs, bartenders, hotel workers, they all lose their income.
Louisiana isn't just fighting an economic storm.
It's fighting oil volatility, climate disasters, an aging levee system, high poverty, and an unstable tax base, all at the same time.
And if a national economic crash hits,
Louisiana won't just stumble, it will sink. Arizona. On postcards, it looks like paradise. Red canyons, endless sun, booming suburbs. And for a while, it really was the American dream. Phoenix alone added over 1.5 million people in just 2 decades, becoming one of the fastest growing metros in the entire country.
But that kind of growth comes at a price. People saw cheap homes, warm weather, low taxes, and they rushed in. Especially Californians. More than 120,000 of them moved to Arizona recently. Now, the infrastructure is breaking under the weight of its own popularity.
Traffic is choking the highways. Schools are overcrowded. Emergency rooms are packed. And the biggest issue, the one nobody wants to face, is water. Arizona relies on the Colorado River for 36% of its water, yet Colorado River levels are collapsing. Lake Mead and Lake Powell are at historic lows.
And the cuts have already begun. Farms in Pinal County have lost so much access to water that tens of thousands of acres of farmland are sitting dry, crops withering under 115-degree heat. That's devastating in a state where agriculture still generates over $23 billion a year.
Exactly. No water means no crops, and that ripple hits grocery prices across the entire country. And speaking of heat, Arizona's summers are turning deadly. Temperatures soaring past 115 degrees month after month, forcing families to run air conditioning almost nonstop. Power bills spike to $300, $400 a month, and when inflation hits, people simply can't keep up.
Meanwhile, the state relies heavily on construction and real estate, 2 industries that collapse the second interest rates rise. And right now, rates are soaring. If housing demand freezes, tens of thousands of jobs vanish instantly. We've seen this movie before. Arizona was one of the epicenters of the 2008 housing crash.
And here's the final blow. That fast population growth that once fueled the boom is now a burden. More residents mean more demand for water, more pressure on the grid, more stress on roads and hospitals. The state simply can't keep up.
So when the national economy finally crashes, and it will, Arizona won't have the water, the stable jobs, or the infrastructure to withstand the shock.
A booming desert city can look like a miracle, right up until the moment the mirage disappears. California, the world sees it as a dream. Silicon Valley, Hollywood, beaches, billion-dollar startups. A $4.4 trillion economy, bigger than the UK and India. On paper, it looks unstoppable.
But that's the illusion, isn't it? A golden facade covering hairline fractures that are widening by the day. And when the national economy crashes, California won't just shake, it'll be the epicenter of the quake.
Let's start with the tech sector. Silicon Valley alone generates over $400 billion a year, but it's also the most vulnerable to global downturns. When the world tightens its belt, tech layoffs explode, and we've already seen tens of thousands of jobs vanish.
And those layoffs ripple everywhere. From San Francisco to San Jose to Los Angeles, entire neighborhoods depend on tech salaries. One bad quarter at a big firm, and suddenly rental markets collapse. Small businesses lose customers,
tax revenues crater.
Speaking of taxes, California's government is staring down a $68 billion budget deficit. 500,000 people have fled the state since 2020, taking billions in tax dollars with them. You can't fund a $100 billion state bureaucracy when your middle class is packing U-Hauls to Texas and Nevada.
And the real estate market? Oh boy, median home price, $760,000. Rents in places like San Francisco, over $3,000 a month for a one-bedroom. Meanwhile, gas is often above $6 a gallon. This is what economists call a cost of living death spiral.
Then you have the climate disasters. In 2020 alone, wildfires caused $12 billion in insured damage, and insurers responded by doing what? Abandoning entire counties. Now families are paying $10,000 per year for fire insurance, if they can get a policy at all.
And we can't forget water, mega droughts, empty reservoirs, almond farms, a $5 billion industry dying out. California's agricultural backbone is cracking right alongside its tech and housing sectors.
Even the ports, Los Angeles, Long Beach, Oakland, which handle 40% of all U.S. imports, are vulnerable. One global slowdown, one supply chain disruption, and billions in trade revenue just evaporate.
California is still the golden state, but the gold is peeling. And in the next economic crash, it risks becoming ground zero for America's unraveling.
Illinois? Whenever people talk about economic trouble, this state is always lurking in the background. And honestly, it's not a matter of if Illinois collapses, it's a matter of when.
Exactly. On paper, Illinois looks strong with a $1.1 trillion economy, but the foundation is rotten. The state is drowning in more than $140 billion in unfunded pension liabilities, the worst in the entire country.
That number is staggering. And the worst part? Those pension obligations keep growing every year. Billions that should go to schools, infrastructure, and public safety are instead swallowed up just trying to plug the pension hole.
And the people? They're voting with their feet. Between 2010 and 2023, Illinois lost over 500,000 residents. That's basically wiping a whole city like Tucson right off the map. Every family that leaves takes tax revenue with them, leaving a state even more financially starved.
Which pushes taxes higher and higher. Illinois now has one of the highest property tax rates in America, roughly 2.1% of a home's value every year. For a $250,000 house, that's more than $5,200 annually just in property taxes.
That alone is enough to force middle-class families to pack up and go. But the economic wounds go deeper. Manufacturing, once the pride of Illinois, has been bleeding out for decades. The state has lost over 200,000 manufacturing jobs in just 20 years. And the jobs that remain? Highly vulnerable to global recessions and trade wars.
Even Chicago, the state's crown jewel, isn't immune. Its financial sector brings in $60 billion a year, but companies are fleeing to states like Texas and Florida, where taxes are lower and regulations looser.
And let's talk infrastructure, or what's left of it. Illinois has over 2,300 structurally deficient bridges, and 22% of its roads are in poor condition. Repairs cost drivers more than $600 a year in vehicle damage and delays. Yet the state needs tens of billions to fix it all, and it simply doesn't have the money.
Energy isn't saving them either. Illinois relies heavily on aging nuclear plants that provide more than half its electricity. Maintaining them is expensive, and utility bills are already hundreds above the national average.
Everything in Illinois feels like it's held together with duct tape and hope. High debt, high taxes, aging infrastructure, shrinking population. It's a slow-motion collapse already in progress.
And when the national economy finally breaks, Illinois won't have a safety net. It's standing on the edge of a financial cliff. Florida. Sunshine, beaches, retirees, palm trees. It looks like paradise. But right now, it's one major shock away from becoming unrecognizable. And if the U.S. economy crashes, Florida is in more danger than almost anyone realizes.
Because the entire economy rests on three pillars: tourism, real estate, and agriculture, and all three collapse in a recession. Tourism alone brings in over $100 billion a year and employs 1.5 million people. But when families across America tighten their budgets, vacations are the first thing to go. A 25% drop in tourism would rip out $25 billion from Florida overnight.
And that tourism collapse would hit a state that's already financially unstable. Florida's insurance market is a catastrophe. Major insurers have fled, and families are now paying $6,000 to $10,000 a year just for homeowners insurance, if they can even get a policy. One bad hurricane season, and the entire system could implode.
And with 8 million homes at risk from hurricanes and rising seas, a single Category 4 storm could cause $50 to $100 billion in damage. People won't just lose houses, they'll lose everything. And when that happens in the middle of a national economic downturn, rebuilding becomes almost impossible.
Then there's agriculture, the heart of rural Florida. The state produces 70% of America's citrus, but disease and hurricanes have already slashed production by more than half since the 1990s. Losses top $1 billion every year. If the economy crashes, those farmers won't survive another hit.
And let's not forget population growth. Florida gains nearly 1,000 new residents every single day, pushing the population past 23 million. But that growth is a double-edged sword. Because when the economy slows, people stop moving, construction halts, housing prices wobble, and suddenly the economic engine stalls.
Plus, with over 21% of Floridians aged 65 and older, the state relies on retirement savings, pensions, and fixed incomes. In a financial crash, those savings evaporate, and an already strained healthcare system gets overwhelmed.
So let's call it for what it is. Florida is a gorgeous postcard taped over a crumbling wall. And when the next big economic storm hits,
this so-called paradise could be one of the first places to fall apart. Pennsylvania, a state that once powered America with steel, coal, and industry. On paper, it still boasts a $950 billion economy, ranking among the nation's biggest. But when you dig beneath the surface, Olivia, it's like finding cracks running through the foundation of an old steel mill.
And those cracks aren't small. Let's start with the industries that built Pennsylvania. Coal, down more than 90% since the 1970s. Steel, gutted by foreign competition and automation. Manufacturing still makes up about 12% of the state's GDP, but it's hanging by a thread, as analysts put it.
Exactly. The state has lost over 200,000 manufacturing jobs in the last 2 decades, and the jobs that remain are the first to disappear in a recession. When global demand drops, factories in Pittsburgh, Allentown, and Erie go dark.
And it's not like the population is booming. Pennsylvania's population has basically flatlined for decades, stuck around 12.9 million, while the rest of the country surged. Worse, nearly 20% of the state's population is now over 65. That means rising healthcare costs, shrinking workforce, and a dwindling tax base.
And let's talk about infrastructure, or what's left of it. Pennsylvania has more than 3,300 structurally deficient bridges, the second highest number in the country. Plus, over 25% of its roads are in poor condition, costing drivers $9.4 billion a year in extra repairs, accidents, and wasted time.
And with the state's budget constantly under strain, those repairs keep getting postponed. It's a dangerous loop. Bad infrastructure chokes business, which shrinks tax revenue, which means even less money for repairs.
Energy is another double-edged sword. Pennsylvania is the second largest natural gas producer in the U.S., pumping over 7 trillion cubic feet annually. But natural gas prices swing violently, and a global downturn could slash billions from the state's revenue overnight.
And its agriculture, dairy, mushrooms, poultry, worth $81 billion a year, is being crushed by rising fuel costs, labor shortages, and supply chain chaos. Many farms are already operating on razor-thin margins. One economic shock could wipe them out completely.
So here's the truth. Pennsylvania is standing still while the world moves on. Aging people, aging roads, aging industries, all while expenses climb and revenue shrinks.
And when the national economy finally buckles, Pennsylvania's decline won't be gradual. It could be catastrophic.
New York, the financial heart of America. The skyline, the power, the culture, it feels invincible. But Olivia, the numbers paint a very different picture. New York's GDP may be a colossal $2.4 trillion, yet its foundation is cracking in ways most people refuse to see.
And it starts with Wall Street, the lifeblood of the state. Finance alone makes up 17% of New York's entire revenue, which is insane dependence on a single sector. So imagine what happens when the national economy crashes and the stock market tanks. In 2008, New York lost $60 billion in revenue. A repeat today, with higher debt and inflation, would be devastating.
And that's just the first domino. The commercial real estate market, especially in Manhattan, is in free fall. Offices are sitting empty, vacancy rates pushing above 20%, skyscrapers half lit at night, buildings losing value by the billions.
Which is a nightmare for the city budget. New York City spends nearly $100 billion a year on municipal operations, and a huge chunk of that relies on property taxes. If commercial property values keep sinking, the city could lose $10 to $15 billion in revenue. That's not a crack, that's a sinkhole.
And the people are leaving fast. Since 2020, over 400,000 residents have fled New York, many heading to Florida or Texas. Fewer residents means fewer taxpayers, and fewer taxpayers mean bigger deficits.
Meanwhile, the cost of living is absolutely suffocating. Median household income is around $75,000, but rents in Manhattan run $3,000 plus a month, and basic necessities cost 20 to 30% more than the national average. Healthcare, utilities, groceries, everything is inflated. And yes, New Yorkers pay some of the highest energy rates in the US.
And then there's the subway, the veins of the city. It needs $50 billion in upgrades, but the money just isn't there. Delays, breakdowns, signal failures. It's a system on life support, and the hospital's running out of funds.
Tourism is another lifeline in danger. New York usually pulls in $60 billion a year from visitors, but recessions hit travel hard. Broadway shuts its doors, hotels empty out, restaurant jobs disappear, hundreds of thousands of workers left with nothing.
Put it all together, financial dependence, shrinking population, cratering real estate, aging infrastructure, and you get a giant with feet of clay.
When the next economic crash hits, New York won't just stumble. It'll shake the entire nation as it falls.
Texas loves to boast about being big, powerful, unstoppable. Booming cities, low taxes, endless land, endless opportunity. And with a $2.6 trillion economy, the second largest in the nation, it certainly looks unstoppable.
But here's the truth people don't want to hear. Texas is a giant standing on shaking legs. Its economy is powerful, yes, but it's also dangerously unbalanced. Nearly 14% of its entire GDP comes from oil and gas, over $350 billion a year.
And that's a massive vulnerability. We saw it in 2015 when oil prices crashed below $40 a barrel. Tens of thousands of Texans lost their jobs, and the state bled billions in revenue. Now imagine that happening during a national recession. It would be a disaster.
And it's not just oil. Real estate has been on a wild, overheated run. In cities like Austin, home prices shot up to nearly $570,000 in 2022, then plunged 15% in a single year when interest rates spiked. That kind of volatility, it's a flashing red warning sign.
Exactly. Construction booms to keep up with the population surge. Texas added more than 9 million residents since 2000, pushing its population over 30 million. But when demand slows, those construction jobs vanish. Entire local economies could grind to a halt.
And don't forget the grid, Texas's Achilles heel. The 2021 winter storm caused $130 billion in damages and left millions freezing in the dark. And here's the scary part. The grid still hasn't been fully fixed. Another major weather event could knock it out again, this time during a recession when recovery money is scarce.
Agriculture isn't saving them either. Texas is America's largest producer of cattle, worth $12 billion a year, plus $2 billion in cotton. But constant droughts are forcing ranchers to liquidate herds, slashing production and profits.
And then there's state revenue.
Texas doesn't have an income tax, which sounds great, but it means the state relies on sales taxes for over 60% of its budget. So when consumer spending drops during a crash, the state's finances get gutted.
Texas loves to boast about being big, powerful, unstoppable.
But the truth is, when the national economy cracks, Texas is carrying so much weight, population, energy dependence, aging infrastructure, that it risks collapsing under its own size.
Michigan, if there's any state that knows what collapse feels like, it's this one. People still remember 2008. Factories shuttered, homes abandoned, entire neighborhoods in Detroit turning into ghost towns. And Ethan, the numbers today look hauntingly similar.
You're not kidding. Michigan's economy is worth about $640 billion, but it leans almost entirely on one thing, the auto industry. And that industry is incredibly fragile during economic downturns. In 2008, Michigan lost nearly 200,000 auto jobs when GM and Chrysler were on the brink of collapse.
And now we're heading into another storm with even more uncertainty. EV demand is slowing, global supply chains are unstable, material prices are volatile. If a recession hits in 2025, the auto sector could take another catastrophic blow.
And when autos fall, Michigan falls. It's the classic one-engine economy problem. You crash the engine, the whole car stops. And Michigan's engine is sputtering.
Population decline makes it even worse. Michigan has fewer people today than it did 20 years ago. Detroit, still shrinking. Flint, still struggling. Entire communities are evaporating. And with every family that leaves, the tax base collapses further.
Meanwhile, the bills keep growing. The state has massive pension obligations, rising healthcare costs, and cities like Detroit still carry billions in debt, even after bankruptcy in 2013. It's like trying to patch a sinking ship with duct tape.
And Michigan's agricultural sector, worth $14 billion a year, is under assault. Cherries, apples, dairy, all facing rising fuel prices, supply chain shocks, and unpredictable weather patterns. One bad year can wipe out an entire town's economy.
Then there's the infrastructure crisis. Michigan's roads are infamous, some of the worst in the entire country. Nearly 40% of its roads are in poor condition, costing drivers about $650 a year in damage. The state needs $4 billion annually just to stabilize things, and it doesn't have that money.
Add in high electricity costs, some of the highest in the Midwest, and you get a picture of a state that's already stretched thin, even before a major recession hits.
Here's the terrifying truth. Michigan never fully recovered from the last collapse.
So when the next economic crash arrives, with shaky auto sales, shrinking towns, failing infrastructure, and rising costs, Michigan won't just stumble.
It will relive 2008, only deeper, harder, and longer. And this time, there may be no bailout big enough to save it.
Ethan, after everything we've just laid out, the debt, the failing grids, the mass migration, the crumbling bridges, it's no longer a question of if a crisis is coming. It's a question of who collapses first and how many follow.
And the data is absolute. These 10 states, from Nevada to Michigan, are carrying the heaviest economic vulnerabilities in the entire country. They rely on unstable industries, shrinking tax bases, aging infrastructure, or resources that are literally running out. This isn't speculation. It's exactly what the numbers show in the report. Exploding debt, failing utilities, soaring insurance, massive population flight, and industries on life support.
What scares me is the domino effect. If just one of these states collapses during a national recession, the shockwaves will spread to banks, to supply chains, to housing markets, to millions of families who think they're safe.
And the truth? Most Americans have no idea how close their state might be to the edge.
But awareness is the first step. If people understand what's coming, the vulnerabilities, the warning signs, the pressure points, they can prepare. They can make decisions that protect their families instead of being blindsided.
Because this isn't fear-mongering. It's a wake-up call.
A chance to prepare instead of panic later.
And maybe, just maybe, a chance to fix what's broken before it breaks us.
If this story resonated with you, please share your sense of strength in the comments, and let's spread this quiet pride to the world.